Right, I have that it is 3 o'clock. Let me start showing this video. Welcome to our session, our TrinDocs session here, our 3 o'clock session. We've only got one more after this, which is our wrap up. We really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to attend these sessions with us. And I'm super excited about this one. This is the one I've been waiting for all day because all of our Dynamics clients, we talk about TrinDocs all the time. And this is your chance to get to see it in action. And I am excited because I think that this can benefit any Dynamics user, and not only Dynamics users, but anyone. So we have Jay Harden and John Stuckey who are going to present today. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to let Jay take over. And I really appreciate all of you guys today. A couple of housekeeping notes. You are being recorded on this session. So if that bothers you or you want to just log out, we will have this session available soon. So we'll clean it up and get it to you. Also, you'll get an email at the end of the session or later on this afternoon probably to fill that out, and you'll be registered for the door prizes. And if you have any questions during this session, feel free to use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen and type in the question. Callie, Bobby, and I will monitor this, and we will make sure that Jay and John get those questions. If for some reason they can't answer it, then we will be sure to get back with you after the session. And again, you can log into our wrap-up session if you have any additional questions. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to let Jay take over.
All right, thank you, Tara. Yeah, that's what I was trying to do here. Let's see if I can. All right, I will share my screen here. Okay, it's still not letting me do video there, Tara, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, sure.
And are we recorded? Let's see.
Yes, we're going.
Awesome. Great.
Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, appreciate it, Tara. And she mentioned my name is Jay Harden. I'm the director, team lead of TrinDocs. I really appreciate everybody being on. There's some of you that are on that I think I've spoken to before. And for those who I haven't, I've been with TrinSoft for about 10 years and been working on TrinDocs for 6 years. So we have developed a document management solution that really has grown into a P2P solution, right? We want to be able to handle all of from the initial part of the requisition on the payable side to your check being cut and payment on the payment side. And that's what TrinDocs is. TrinDocs is specifically a document management solution that focuses on those types of transactions. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And there's actually 3 components of our solution. So there's Forms, which John Stuckey, our president, is going to be discussing here. I'm going to hand it off to him after we go through some of these slides. There's TrinDocs, which focuses on the automation piece of payable invoices coming into your organization. And then TrinPay, which helps streamline those checks, ACH, and credit card payments going out to your vendors. So we're a complete procurement and automation solution, and we really are focused on that mid-market. I think you also hear that from the TrinSoft side, where this is the space we know really well, and we've designed our solution from the ground up specifically for the mid-market, so that our solution is affordable and has really, really rich feature sets that are pretty new to some of those in the mid-market. And TrinDocs specifically, like I said, is a document management solution, but we're again focused on ROI. So all of the time and money you spend processing payable invoices, we want to eliminate as much as we can, right? We're really focused on, in the first 20 to 25 months, saving your organization around $100,000. And for companies that do that, that have a 4% net margin, let's say, $100,000 cost savings is equivalent to $2.5 million in new revenue. So when we're implementing TrinDocs, when we're working with our clients, ROI is our number one thought process, right? How are we going to make you more efficient and save you money processing these transactions? And there actually is a lot of different documents you can use TrinDocs. You could put in TrinDocs and use TrinDocs as a workflow solution. So TrinDocs as a whole is a document management solution that you can use for electronic file cabinet, workflow approvals. And as we dig in, we can discuss a lot of the different document types that you can use TrinDocs for. But today we're focused on AP automation. AP automation is the focus of TrinDocs. And we're designed to work with what we call inbound automation. So about 6 years ago, when John was working with our team to create TrinDocs, we noticed that the majority of our clients, right, were receiving invoices via email. And it was only growing and growing and growing. And now today, actually, there's a lot of vendors that are making you go download documents from a web portal, which again is a huge time sink, and we're working for solutions to help with that as well. But the majority of vendors email you invoices directly. Instead of sending invoices via the mail, they're emailing you invoices in. And about 6 years ago, we said, look, it'd be really neat if we designed a solution that monitored an email address automatically, grabbed any PDFs that were coming into that email address, read the data off of those PDFs, and put that in our ERP and accounting solutions. If there was a system that could do that, that would be really neat. And we built TrinDocs with that in mind from day one, right? Is this idea that we want to make it easier to process these incoming invoices, right? And we want to be able to match those invoices against purchase orders and receipts as they come in. And that really, that bullet point number 2 is our biggest ROI, right? If we can automatically match your invoices against receipts and shippers, some people call them shipments, some people call them receivers, receipts, we can streamline and make you so efficient. It really is crazy. That number 2 is really our bread and butter. And we do it for each individual client almost on a custom basis, in the sense that everyone has different business rules for their invoices with purchase orders. For example, you might be okay with a variance. You might not be okay with a variance. You might say, look, Jay, if it's within 5% and it's less than $100, I'm okay with you coding it to this variance GL and moving on, right? Getting in the weeds a little bit there of some of the business rules we can apply, but that's really what we do. We dig in with your organization and figure out what are your specific business rules and how can we create our integrations to match those business rules, so that we're doing a lot of that matching, we're doing a lot of that comparing and coding automatically as invoices come in. And so as invoices come in, we're going to check, is there a PO number on it? Yep. Okay. Then go compare it against a purchase receipt line. If there's not, we're going to route it out for users to approve. Can we auto code it? Can we assign it to somebody who can code it? And then can we automatically take that data and put it into your ERP system? So that's what TrinDocs AP automation is really focused on. You're going to be able to quickly see documents that come in, invoices that haven't been posted yet, invoices that still need to be paid, and you'll be able to search and retrieve for those invoices after the fact. And again, we believe at the minimum, we're going to save you $3 a document, potentially $9 if we could apply a lot of those business rule automation steps that I talked about, right? So there's multiple components of TrinDocs, being able to capture or OCR that data. OCR stands for optical character recognition. Inbound automation, which is what I already talked about, this idea that we're going to monitor email addresses, workflow, who are the users who need to approve and see these documents before we say they're good to be posted in our accounting solution and paid. And then integration and retrieval, the ability to retrieve those documents and be completely connected to your ERP system. So this gives you an idea of some case studies that we've done where we found the potential savings anywhere between $3 and $9 a document. So that's a lot about TrinDocs, and I'm going to let John talk about TrinForms here. We also designed TrinForms as a lightweight requisition tool, and he's going to get into the bones about this. But just to go through the three components of it, it's really focused on TrinForms and TrinPay, which we have. And actually, I'm going to pass it off to John now at this moment and let him talk about TrinForms, and then we'll show you a little bit of TrinDocs.
Thanks, Jay. It's John Stuckey here. It's really nice to see a lot of those familiar names in the list. Thanks a lot for sticking with us this afternoon. There's a special reward for those who stuck it out with these last couple of sessions, so we appreciate that. As Jay said, TrinForms is kind of the continued evolution of our TrinDocs solution. He mentioned a P2P, that's procure to pay. In the payables and procurement automation world, procure to pay is kind of this phrase that's been evolving, and it talks about the ability from initial procurement and requisition all the way through the final payment to the vendor. And TrinForms is kind of an additional module in our solution that we've rolled out. We've got that available this year. It's a hosted solution, and it focuses really on the front end of a transaction, where TrinDocs automation focuses on the support, on recording the transaction, automating that process, automating business rules, and being your audit trail right in your electronic file cabinet. TrinForms focuses on the transaction initiation, right? Creating it, approving it, getting it initially coded, and authorizing the transaction. You know, when the vendor's been contacted and the AP invoice comes, we're committed. Now it's a question of whether the amount is right and when we pay and how to write that kind of thing. On the front end, TrinForms commits us, right? This is where we are seeking approval to do a purchase authorization. It's any kind of form though. We focus and talk a lot about payables and this procure to pay solution. As he mentioned, TrinForms is also applicable, just like TrinDocs, to other document types. It could be HR and personnel requests, such as time off, expense reimbursement. We're seeing a lot of traction in expense reimbursement and automation. And about any other form or document that you submit and need people to look at to approve. TrinForms is about creating a transaction authorization record, capturing the data you need to authorize that transaction and having it approved, and then creating the initial element of that transaction in another system, be it a PO in your ERP system, a document in TrinDocs. We have a customer right now using TrinForms itself as the purchase order and as a purchase order document. So, and as I said, it's hosted only. All right, go to the next slide there, Jay. We're sharing here. So the other element we have in addition to forms and automation is TrinPay, and this is new. And we have partnered with an outside organization called Invoice Pay. They're similar to a company like a bill.com. They're geared for the mid-market, and they remove all of the burden and all of the elements around paying your vendors. Once you have an approved, okay to pay AP invoice in your system, their solution will integrate with yours on Dynamics or others for that matter, and they'll pay your vendors for you. That's it. You don't have to worry about it at all. They have rebates that makes it extremely affordable, if not profitable for you, which is hard to believe, but there's a lot they can do there, and they completely take care of it. They care of contacting the vendor setup. So you don't have to worry at all about sending things via ACH, paying via credit card, paying via check. They'll take care of all of that. You can tell which vendors you want them to pay. Maybe you still want to carve out certain vendors and pay them yourself. You certainly, of course, have the opportunity to do that. But anyone you don't want to worry about, they can simply pay the vendors for you. And again, at that price point, which I believe starts at about $1.50 a payment, and that's before rebates, there's no way you can process a check or a payment for that price, right, to get it in the mail. So TrinPay is new, it's brand new with us. Again, we've partnered with this company called Invoice Pay. That's the letter N, Voice Pay. They're a part of a large organization, I think Comdata, another company. So they're a very large processor, and we're excited about that opportunity. So that's applicable to anybody. You don't need TrinDocs or TrinForms to use this either. Any Dynamics customer, GP, NAV, BC, D365 can utilize TrinPay and utilize that solution. All right, moving on. We talked about where these two solutions play. And this is just kind of a visual of what I described there. TrinDocs is on the later end, right? The commitment's done. That's where we're supporting, and we are recording the transaction. We're storing it permanently in electronic file cabinet, making sure that as part of the recording of that transaction, we've got all business rules accounted for and all of our T's crossed and our I's dotted. TrinForms is on the front end of the transaction. That's where we're initiating it, we're validating the data that we need, and we're approving it, right? It's pre-commitment, so to speak, to the vendor. On TrinDocs, it's pretty much post-commitment to the vendor. So we'll talk about this even more as we show it. Go ahead, Jake. All right, on the form processing, there are a couple of different elements to submitting the form, right? First thing, we fill it out. The great thing about TrinForms, all of the setup and the interface can be managed by the user. So you have the ability to add fields, move them around, position them on a tab, show which fields you want on the list. You can design the form with tabs, layout, fields, field types. All of that is changeable in the interface. So you, the end users, can do it. You don't need us to do that. You can set up your own forms. You can create unlimited number of forms. The user creates and submits one, and then you define the workflow for that form. And our workflow enables steps to edit, to change, to update the form, or approvals. And one of the key differences between TrinDocs and TrinForms is that our approvals are simultaneous. It's designed, right, to approve and authorize a transaction. So if you have 100 approval rules, and that's not crazy, right? Maybe you have a person has to approve it based on what department it's coded to, or who the vendor is, or the amount, or any combination thereof. We support multiple conditions, multiple approval rules, and simultaneous approvals, which means if we get the document and we look at it and assess your conditions and your rules, and 12 people have to approve it, we immediately put that document into the inbox of all 12 people, and then we'll track who's left to approve it. Once the last person approves, we move it on to the next step. And then finally, as a document is complete in TrinForms, I mentioned one customer today is using that as a PO that they send to a vendor. Others are more normal solution when it's complete is for us to integrate that into Dynamics or another ERP system, right? Maybe integrate that into TrinDocs, right? We're taking that approved transaction and then we're taking the next step. We're putting it where it needs to go to initiate and execute the transaction. All right. Next slide there. A couple of concepts. Entities. TrinForms was designed for multiple entities. We saw right away, and we certainly know this from our TrinDocs experience. Lots of companies have multiple entities that they're supporting, be it locations and business units, all the way to formal EIN, separate corporate legal entities. And the approval rules, the users, the routing might need to be different for each one. So we support multiple entities, and multiple form types, unlimited, requisitions, checklists, expense reimbursement, purchase orders, purchase requisitions, you name it, right? You can create as many of those as you want. They're easy to edit and change. The form type fields support field types, auto entry of controls for things like drop downs, checkboxes, calendar controls, things like that. And then we have one of the features we brought over from TrinDocs called extenders. One of the things you like about an easy to use online form is the ability to have that drop down that looks at your vendor list from Dynamics, right? We can do that in TrinForms, and we've got that definable by you. So you can do fixed drop downs. I can do look downs on GL accounts, segments of your GL, vendors, all of those different things. We've even taken it to the level of you can define the captions and the names and the words, how they're displayed on the form. Maybe you don't call it a requisition, you call it a purchase request. Somebody else calls it a purchase order. And little details like that make a difference. One of the things we see with TrinForms and we've targeted is we want it to be extremely easy to use. TrinDocs is designed for the back office user, right? The back office user is an accounting professional, an IT professional. They're used to ERP systems, they're used to transactions, and they know how to make them work properly. They know how to key validated data and that you can't post a transaction without a good GL account. When you have end users out there in the field, healthcare professionals, right? Location managers, right? Providers, they're not used to ERP systems. They're not used to the rules of creating valid transactions. As a result, you have to make those forms very easy, very recognizable, and comfortable for them to use. That was one of the core tenets that we built Trend Forms on. Make it really easy for the users so that they'll adapt it, so that they'll relate to it, and enable them to quickly and easily enter forms and enter these documents. All right. Additional elements of the solution, workflows, which I mentioned. Workflow steps as you want. The workflow steps include approval rules and conditions, which is really nice. I mentioned the simultaneous approvals as well. We have multiple users, right? Users are set up. There is no concept of a viewer. In TrinDocs, we have this concept of a viewer, somebody who can just see that data. Remember, it's a electronic file cabinet concept. Trend Forms is not, right? Trend Forms is creating a transaction. Every user in Trend Forms is a licensed user who has the ability to initiate one of the forms. It's a robust security model, so you have complete control over the permissions and the roles over who can use what and do what. But the users are all authorized to create forms, and then you have admin users who define things. Multiple one-to-many sections. Everybody's familiar with the form. You have a header and you have lines. We can create multiple sections of lines to do things like cost categories, GL accounts, additional notes and individual line items. All of those could be one-to-many elements to the header of the form. We have attachments. We can do printed PDF or hard copy. And as I've mentioned, flexible layout options. Okay. So that's kind of an overview of Trend Forms and Trend Pay. We wanted to move through the slides pretty quick because our plan here for the rest of the time we have together is to show you. Right? I think I'm going to turn it back over to Jay, who's going to show you a little bit of TrinDocs. For those of you that haven't seen it, he's going to let you see the interface to TrinDocs, and then he'll pass it back to me, and we'll take a look at our Trend Forms solution and what that looks like. And we're going to take a look at approving a form and creating a form in Trend Forms. Jay, back to you.
Yeah. Thanks, John. I appreciate it. All right, let's jump out of here and actually show you some fun stuff here. So TrinDocs and Trend Forms, and I think this is two things we didn't really mention. Everything's web-based, right? There's no client install needed for anything that we've talked about in this session, right? All of our users interact with TrinDocs and Trend Forms and Trend Pay via websites, right? So regardless if your ERP system is on-prem or if you're in the cloud, like with Dynamics BC, it doesn't matter. Your end users are going to experience TrinDocs and Trend Forms via a web browser. We work with any browser, Mozilla, Firefox, Safari. We prefer Chrome and the new Edge, right? That's where we test mostly and build our site around because we believe that's the most common. So, but we'll work with any browser that you have. We also have iPhone and Android apps on the TrinDocs side, which we didn't mention, I'll get into here in just a minute. So as your users log in, if they'll be able to log in with their Windows user ID or with a TrinDocs user ID. There's some different reasons for using one or the other, but for those of you who are on Office 365 and things like that, we try to keep it as single sign-on as we can. And as users log into TrinDocs, and again, I'm doing the TrinDocs. So this is the payable invoice side, right? So this is what happens after a vendor has emailed you an invoice. Let's say they've mailed you an invoice as well. We work with that. You can scan those invoices in. So there's three ways to get documents into the system. You can upload them via our website, you can scan them in, or you can email them into an email address that we're monitoring. As documents come in, we're going to take them through workflows and they're going to end up in users' queues. So you can see as I log in, I've got a queue box here called My Queues. And these are invoices that are waiting on me to approve. They're assigned to me specifically. I'm logged in as the test user here, and it's assigned to me and it's waiting for me to give a thumbs up here. Now, as you can see, this is what we call the edit screen, edit window, whatever you want to call it. This is where users interact with the actual image of the document. This is where users spend 80% of their time in our solution, okay? So invoices has come in, and TrinDocs has attempted to OCR some of the data off of the document. OCR, optical character recognition, again, that's the ability to capture data off of this invoice as it comes in. And we're going to try to map that data to specific fields. So these metadata fields or fields values here are customizable to you as the client. Our clients that are on BC and NAV are going to have different field names than our clients on GP or another type of ERP system. We build these for each customer. And for those of you who are on the similar ERP systems on the AP side, 90% of the fields are going to be the same, but you might have a field specifically like a dimension code on the NAV side that's designed for you specifically. Like you might call it location code, right? We're going to name a field called location code. That might not be a field that another client uses. So this is customizable. We have header and line fields here. And this is where the user takes action against the document. And our action ribbon bar here is really straightforward, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Can't get any easier than that. If you make any changes to the document, you have the ability to edit the document. You also have the ability to scroll through that queue. So that queue of 2 documents that I had, I can click get next, and now I'm at the end of my queue here. Okay, I've hit the end, and TrinDocs is letting me know that now I'm done. If you jump in the middle of the queue and you hit get next, it knows where you were and it takes you back out to the inbox because you're at the end of your list. You can attach other files here. You can download or email the PDF, and you can also assign this document to other users. So let's say I want to assign this document to George Washington. I could do that relatively easy. And now the document is in George Washington's queue. I'm going to jump over into Gmail here really quickly and show you what it looks like when there is a document that a user needs to approve. So let me bounce back there. So we've now assigned this document to George Washington. It's in George Washington's queue. Because TrinDocs has what's called email notifications, it's going to send George Washington an email. And an example of that looks just like this, right? That he has a document that he needs to approve in his queue, right? And right from his email, so now I'm in Gmail here, George Washington will have the ability to approve or reject this document. He can also click on the document ID and the document link, and that's going to take him directly to TrinDocs. So he can actually manage the document from there. But our email notifications are really nice in the sense that it's going to give the user metadata, the header metadata fields there. It's going to show them the first page of the document. And from the email, George Washington can approve or reject this document. Now, we have iPhone and Android apps, but what we noticed is that most of our users are saying, look, I like the apps, but I'm on my email client and my mobile device anyways. If you gave me an email notification where I could approve it right from my email, that would be quicker for me. And so we did that. So when documents are assigned to specific users, they will receive email notifications that they've got a document they need to approve. Also, our notes section here is it can be popped out, or you can keep it collapsed if you like. And that's a narrative, right? So we have our metadata fields as well as notes, and the notes are communication between users. So before I assigned it to George Washington, it would have probably been a good idea for me to add a note and let them know why I'm assigning it. Or if you reject the document, pretty good idea to add a note of why you're rejecting it. We can even require a note when you reject that document. So this gives you a little bit idea of the edit screen. Also, we have an audit trail within TrinDocs, like John talked about, around audit trails of any time a user approves or views a document, there is an audit trail for your auditors to see, okay, who approved it. I'm actually going to search here and give you an idea of what it feels like to search for documents in TrinDocs. So let's say I was searching for a vendor and I wanted to see all of the invoices that match that vendor. TrinDocs is going to label those based on workflow steps or containers, right? As documents are complete, we move them into what we call a complete step. When you open up documents that are completed, you can't edit them. You can't make any changes to them. We're really integrated with your ERP system. So by the time that invoice has been posted and paid, we want to make sure TrinDocs and your ERP system, GP, NAV, BC, are lock and key, right? The data that's in TrinDocs and the data in your ERP system should match exactly, even down to the GLs, even down to the invoice numbers, so that when you search, you can find them, and we lock it down and you can't make any changes to them. You also can export this list really easily to Excel. So I'm going to export this list to Excel, and I can manipulate this data however I want. Let me close those out. And when I find the invoice that I'm looking for with my VLOOKUPs or pivot tables, I know we got a lot of accountants on the room with all that fun stuff. You actually can click on column A, and column A is a hyperlink that takes you directly to the document, okay? So anytime within that Excel search list, you'll be able to see, you'll be able to get back to the document whenever you want. Going back to search, we also want to make it very easy from your ERP systems to come back to a TrinDocs invoice, right? And how do we do that? Well, because our sister company TrinSoft is so smart at the ERP side, we've had them add buttons into all the different ERP systems. And what I mean by buttons are look back. So this idea that when you're in your ERP, when you're in GP, when you're in NAV, when you're in your BC environment, we want you to stay there. We don't want you to have to bounce back and forth. We will add these buttons that will take you directly to the corresponding document in TrinDocs. So if I click on that button, it's going to take me directly to that corresponding transaction. It's going to let me see the backup for that transaction. And you remember when I said we try to make sure that the data in the two systems match exactly? That's exactly what we have here, even down to the GLs and the distribution lines, right? So that's a GP example. I've got a BC environment up here as well. I'll show you kind of how we can do that. So if we're, for those of you who are familiar with BC, we're looking at vendor ledgers here. I'm actually going to go to, we'll go to our vendors here. And we'll take a look at a balance for a particular vendor, right? And when I'm looking at these vendor ledger entries, we add these buttons within TrinDocs to actually search that image. So you can actually search for it, and it will take you directly to that corresponding image. So let me get on here. And I don't have any invoices that match that particular invoice. But what you can see is, you can see that it'll actually let you search. Oh, and that's because I'm logged in as a user who doesn't have access to it. So give me just a second. Close that. And it'll take you directly to that image. So that gives you a little bit idea how our permissions work. If you don't have permissions to view a document, you're not going to be able to see it. You won't be able to search for it. You won't be able to retrieve it. But anytime within GP, within NAV, we have buttons that we could put in NAV. Anytime within those ERP systems, you'll always be one click away from seeing the backup support for these particular images. So when I click search image, there it is, right from BC, GP, NAV, any of our ERP systems. The other piece that I want to talk about is we'll apply the payment application as well. And this is actually really neat because we've had a lot of CFOs and controllers tell us that this particular feature actually has saved them quite a bit of time and money. And that's the idea that you can search based on check number within TrinDocs. And we will actually apply what we call related rules here. So I'm going to actually look for a check number here. There we go. And you'll notice that we will apply the check number back to the documents. So you can see here's a check number here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to search for this check number now. And you're going to see that this check number paid 3 invoices, right? And TrinDocs is looking into your ERP system for those payments. And when that payment happens, whether through TrinPay or through your ERP system, we're going to apply it to the specific document. And when we do that, you have the ability to create what we call related rules, right? So these related rules are going to relate those invoices that have the same check number to each other. So here's an invoice, but here's another invoice, and here's another invoice. And they're related because the same check paid all of those invoices. So when the auditor says, hey, go and pull these 3 invoices that check 209 paid, You can do it within one click. The other really neat feature is we have this document related packet. And it's pretty slick in the sense that it will relate all of the related invoices and create one PDF that's combined instantly, right? So these are one-page invoices, but I can download the PDF and I get a one-page invoice here, one-page PDF. I can also download it and I get a related document packet. It's going to give me all three of those invoices there together. We get told that feature, and we actually designed that feature for a specific client. We get told a lot that feature saves our clients so much time. That will also work on a three-way match for packing slips and purchase orders, right? So if you're looking at an invoice here and you want to see the related packing slip and you want to see the related purchase order, TrinDocs will relate them automatically. Now, watch what happens if I remove this PO number. There's no more related documents. The moment I assign it back, I've got my related documents. And now I can download my related packet. And there's my invoice. There's my packing slip. There's my purchase order. And TrinDocs does that merge automatically for you. So no more check matching and packet matching. And when auditors come, it's a breeze. So last thing that I want to talk about is the idea of TrinDocs and the ability to code these invoices like you would code them in your ERP system. So again, we talked about TrinDocs OCRing data. We talked about TrinDocs matching against POs. Now, this isn't as important when we're matching against POs because those POs are already coded. Those POs are already coded. So if we're able to go and match against purchase receipt, well, we know the GL account and we can pass those in. As long as we've OCR'd that data, we're going to be able to create that invoice automatically without any user interaction, hopefully, right? But for invoices without POs, for those of you in AP and accounting, you know they still need to be coded. Well, we're going to help you automate that as well. So John talked about these extenders and these integrations into your ERP system. We're going to do that, right? So let's say this document did not get OCR'd and none of the data came through. We want your users to be able to code this invoice as quickly as possible. So these fields are actually hooked into your ERP system. So if I want to validate or code a vendor name to it, this is looking into your ERP system vendors. If you add a vendor in BC or GP, it's going to show up here within 15 seconds. Your users can actually code this invoice in TrinDocs, right? And I'm coding it and I'm going to apply my totals and I'm even going to apply my GL accounts, right? So 2158.75. And this particular solution is hooked into GP. So GP has those segmented GLs, right? And I'm going to choose my segments and I can code this invoice right here. And TrinDocs will then, once I approve it, once it's determined that it's okay in the workflow, we will go create this invoice automatically in GP. And we won't go into the weeds here in this demo, but on our one-on-one demos, we will actually create that transaction for you in GP and show you exactly what it looks like. So the moment this is approved, we'll go past this data and create this invoice in GP because we only let your users choose valid GLs or valid vendors or valid payment terms. So this idea that when you're in TrinDocs, I want you to be in TrinDocs. When you're in GP or NAV or BC, I want you to be in GP and NAV or BC. I don't want you having to code via dual monitors. We're going to bring all that data that your user needs to validate this information in TrinDocs. Really helps with coding and helping auto coding. And it allows your AP users to say, you know what, I don't have this invoice coded. Let's assign this to George Washington. Let him apply the coding for me. And then he can send it back to me to review before I say this is good. Okay, I went over my time a little bit there. So I've only given John about 15 minutes to show Trend Forms. But hopefully that gives you a good idea, a good overview of TrinDocs and the power of the system. We didn't even get into the workflows and all the different workflows and routing rules that you can create within TrinDocs and all the other different document types that you can do, even down to HR, an electronic repository. You could see here within my my workflows here. We've got some HR documents in here as well. So the ability for TrinDocs to do other document types is pretty great as well. I'm actually going to stop my screen here and let John start presenting. John, I'll pass it to you.
All right, thanks, Jay. I'm starting my screen share up here. Hopefully you guys are seeing it soon. As he said, there's a lot there in TrinDocs. You know, one of the beautiful things about that automation, if if all of the rules hit and the receipt lines match, you get 100 invoices in today from vendors, you don't touch them. You don't touch them at all, right? No user touches them. The system handled them, it processed them, it matched the receipts line. It automatically inserted your AP invoice into your ERP system as a posted document with all those links he showed you attached. So if anything didn't match, you get these beautiful cues that have the lists that show you what you need to look at. This one didn't match. This one has a variance, whatever it might be. So great automation there. Getting into TrinForms. So now on the front end of that transaction, what's TrinForms designed for? First thing I'll point out, it's really designed for requisitions, transaction initiation, approval of documents that aren't necessarily ERP inventory purchase orders, right? Your purchase order stuff to supply your plant or keep the manufacturing floor running needs to be tied to your ERP system and your MRP, the materials planning stuff. This is designed for lightweight requisitions, approval requests, coding things, authorizations, if you will. So one of the easiest ways to look at it is to kind of think about this approval process that we have. This is a little simple sample I've got for you here. So in this organization, it's not uncommon where this is a healthcare organization and these are anybody in the organization who's going to submit a requisition for non-clinical, right? Now, this isn't a patient supply. This is something that they need to run their department or their area or their location. So they submit the form, and of course they have a departmental approval area. Then they have accounting cost centers that often can be something like locations, maybe it's jobs or projects, right? It could be various levels of accounting or coding that you're doing on the transaction. And of course, those can trigger approvals because my department head has to approve it and the person in charge of the cost center or the grant or the location, right, or the area has to approve it. Then they have VPs. They have an executive management team who approves everything in their area. So the executive management team ultimately kind of has that authority. So by this stage in the game, we've potentially had 3 different levels of people approving. Now, this organization has a specific job and project set up. So if the purchase is for jobs, we launch into a whole nother set of approvals. We've got to get the right job coding done, and then we've got another set of job approvals. If it's not job related, we pass that, right? We skip that. And then the last thing we have is a CEO level, an executive director level approval for anything, regardless of the coding, regardless of the detail, over 100,000. That goes to them. Once that's done, we're complete in TrinForms. And then again, we're creating a PO in the ERP system so they don't rekey anything so that we have it linked. The PO could be from TrinForms itself. We can create it in the ERP system. We can generate that and create a document in TrinDocs automatically. So what does it look like? Here's the interface for TrinForms. And just like TrinDocs, it's done through a browser. I'm going to log in as an administrator here. And we'll see the interface. Remember, the design concepts of TrinForms was to keep everything very easy and very simple to use. So I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of what we're looking at here on the interface. First up, we're in the inbox. You can kind of see that's bold. That's the current item I have selected from my menu up here. I have inbox, pending, completed, and these represent documents that are of that type, right? So these are documents in my inbox. And if it's in my inbox, I'm supposed to do something with it. I can approve it, or maybe I need to edit it, right? I've got to do one of those 2 things with all 4 of these documents. Pending and completed are documents that I created, right? I'm in as admin. If we look over to the top right side, I can see that I'm logged in as admin. I'm currently working in this company, this entity. Remember, we have multiple entities. And within this entity, I'm currently working with my PO forms. We have multiple forms, multiple entities, multiple users. And we've even provided the ability to alias switch users based on your permission. So if Jay's out for a week and somebody needs to approve his documents for that week, the administrator, based on permissions, has the ability with one click could switch over to Jay and execute his approval, so we don't hold anything up. By clicking on each of these links, it pulls up what I have available to me. So as the admin user, I have the ability to get into either of these two entities, and I can see a couple of different forms available on this entity. Forms are linked to entities. Back over to our lists. These are documents that have been completed. Don't have any completed in this form type, in this entity. I can search for forms. And once I search for a form and find it, I have the ability to copy that. That was a feature we heard right away. I don't want to rekey 25, 30, 100 lines of a detailed purchase request. I want to just copy it and use that as the baseline for a new one. So we certainly have the ability to do that on anything that's out there as well. And then back to our inbox. The link under form ID and all of this layout is definable by you. I'm going to get into some of the settings of that after. I thought the first step here, let's just take a look at what it looks like from a user perspective using the system. To access the form, to access the document, all I do is click on the link and it takes me to the form, right? This entire layout, everything you're seeing, the form names, these are tabs, the tabs themselves, the order of the tabs, what field goes on what tab, the multiple one-to-many line sections, including attachments and comments, all of it definable by you, the users, within the interface of the system itself. So here I'm looking at a document. My job on this document, without getting into the details, is to edit and to do the coding. When a document's pending, it's either pending because something on the document needs to change. Maybe it went to my accounting team and they have to code something, right? So it's being edited, or I'm pending an approval. Based on that, in this case, I have submit, save, cancel, which tells me that it's pending an edit, that it's waiting on a change. If it was an approval, it would be pending on, it would show an approve, right? An approve or reject up there. All of these are in the active step of update the GL accounts, which means that they're pending the edit. They're waiting on that edit component. All right. So what we'll do, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and log out. We'll log in as another user real quick. We got to log in and out a little bit to see the system in action. So now as we come in as Abe Lincoln, we can see that he has one document that he has to take action on. Again, one in his inbox. He has two that are pending, right? One is waiting for job codes to be edited and one is waiting for the GL accounts to be edited. Abe's got a couple of documents that are complete. He can see those documents. And then from there, as I said, he can copy to a new form or download the PDF. And he can also go search those documents, right? And he can go find a specific form, document, total, right? Search. Once he finds the completed one, he can use that to copy a new one. Now on his approval, so the first thing Abe's going to do when he's using the system, first step, and we do get notifications that I've got something to approve. So I'm going to approve this document that they're waiting on me for, and then I'm going to create a new requisition for some supplies that are needed from my department. So I'll pull up the document. I can take a look at it. Notice that while it's being approved, I can't edit it, right? It's locked while we're waiting on approval. It doesn't make sense to be approving a moving target, right? One of the nice things about the document, in the top left here, I have this little drop down and I can see those approval lines. So here I can see that there were two people who have been asked to approve this. One has already approved it. They're waiting on me. So as soon as I take that step, and that could be one person, that could be 100 people, right? Waiting to approve this document in this particular workflow step. And all of those approvals can have conditions, right? So I could say, Sarah should approve this document every time, or I can create conditions that say Sarah should approve it if it's Department 10, Jay should approve it if it's Department 20, and so on. And I can create those conditions based on any of the data elements of the form. I like what I see here. This looks good. I can add attachments or comments as needed. I'm going to go ahead and approve that. Out it goes. My inbox is now empty. That document has now moved on to the next step. I'm done. Next thing I needed to do today was create a new form, a new requisition for some supplies that we need in our department. So to create a new form, I am going to do my new PO. I simply hit new form. This brings up a new one of that document type. And now all my fields are editable, and we can get a look at what it feels like to interact with and to create one of these forms. So just like on TrinDocs, we have searchable fields, right, with dropdowns. And these are smart lists that are linked automatically to your vendor list or your lookup tables from your ERP system or any other systems for that matter, even fixed lookup lists. I'm going to pick what that is. Once I pick that list, it will automatically fill in some of the other basic data, right? It has access to all of the fields from that table, just like you'd fill out the vendor in something like an ERP system. If I go to enter an invoice, when I select that vendor, some of the other fields from the vendor come over. I'm not going to do this as a check request. That was some testing we were doing with that form. I've got optional fields as well. Again, all these tabs and the position on this is definable by the user. I'm going to come down into my lines, and I'm just going to kind of get this in pretty quick. So I'm going to add a couple of different lines, and I'll do more supplies, right? And we'll get our amount up there a little bit. I can add as many lines as I want. I can delete the lines. You can see it's very, very easy to use, and that's by design. It's amazing how hard you work to make something really simple and easy to use. And we just found that to be so important for adoption from that user base. The users here, your location manager out in Evansville, Indiana, they don't know ERP systems. They're not an accountant. They just want to get their supplies. So it's imperative that it's easy. We also have that ability to track our required fields. Here we can see that asterisk there, which means that's required. If I attempt to submit this without it, it's going to warn us, hey, that's not going to work. You got some stuff you got to do. See, I've got multiple fields here that I've got to fill out. So I'm going to go take care of those and fill out. I can default things to today. Matter of fact, we even are implementing a scripted language that will let me do things like defaults and comparisons and auto calculations and things, well, even though we already have calculated fields. I'm going to go down and fill out the rest of my, fields here. This is a solution that enables us to allocate to the rest of the coding, right? This is a supplies expense, and we get a sense of what it's like to look up some of those numbers. All right, with those filled out, I hit submit. There we go. That simple, that easy. That's all there is to creating and generating a form in TrinForms. Remember, I can start from one that's already been posted if I've got a lot of lines, a lot of detail there. Lots of flexibility in the line types and the types of information you might want to capture. As we can see now, when I come in, I have a new pending document. So the document I just created, 3172, is now showing up in pending and in my inbox. Now, this was a design element we did to show you. I have to approve my own document, which is what I've set up here. But here I can see the documents that I've created. This one is pending an approval. And if I'm going to go approve my own document, and I believe you can define that, by the way, in form settings, if the user is required to approve their own so that we have it in the audit trail, or if we auto approve anything that the document creator is required to do. That's actually a setting you have available to you when you create the form. Here I can look at my approval lines, and just like before, right, I have two people required to approve this. I'm the first one, and of course the admin user. So I'll take a look at it. I'm going to go ahead and put an attachment on there. I should be able to get my attachments out there. I'll just stick something on there, and then I can do a sample comment. Notice that we have the ability to mark these comments for external or not. That dictates whether or not they will show up on the hard copy, on the PDF hard copy for the comment. But I'll add that, so we'll log that we've added a comment on it. I've got all the data. That looks good. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and approve. So once this document is approved, my inbox is done. Abe Lincoln's done for the day, and I get to go home. Right? It's been a long day. I've done a lot of these sessions, and I'm tired now. So now we'll go log in as our admin user. And sure enough, we've got another document here on the admin user, and I can see the current step that it's on. I know who created it, and it's pending approval. And just like before, I can come in, see that document. I can see all the data that's been filled out, including the attachments that the approver added. We didn't talk about that. Based on permissions, the approver can still add comments and attachments, even though I can't change values up here. I can, as before, come up here and see the audit trail of who approved it, who did what. I can see what needs to be approved. And now Abe already approved it and it's waiting on me. In addition, if I'm an administrator and if I have permissions, we have the ability to override users and workflow steps. So if there's something I just need to slam home and get done quick or make an exception, the administrator has the ability to override certain approvals or steps, again, given permissions, and it's all logged. So if the administrator chooses to do that, we write something in that audit trail, the administrator overrode that step and moved this document forward. That way we're never holding anything up. I'm going to go ahead and approve Abe's document. That document's done. Off it goes to the next step. Very simple, very easy to use. And that's the essence of interacting with TrinForms, right? You execute in the company that you're working in, clear your inbox for approvals that you might need to do or updates that you need to do. In this case, I need to update GL accounts. So I've got to go in here, see our GL accounts are empty in this one. So I'll go ahead and update this one and then submit it. And I'm cleaning out my inbox, right? Each user is presented with what they need to work on to keep those documents moving through. Now, in the interest of time here, I'm going to show a little bit of the setup. So over here, we looked in a document at this little menu item on the document itself. Above it, that opens up our setup menu. And this is where, as an administrator, and I'm logged in as an administrator now, if an administrator accesses that area, this is where you set up all of the elements of the system. So we're going to start by looking at our form type. For the form type setup, here you can see the forms that we have. The PO form is the one that we're currently working on. So we're going to edit the PO form. And to do anything to it, to make any changes to it, I've got to put it in development. So when I put it in development, that form, a user cannot submit the form right now of a PO type. They'll get a message. The administrator's working on it, right? That way we always are working on a current accepted setup of the form. I'm going to move through these kind of quick, but here are the definition of all of the fields. These are all the fields we saw in the form. City is pre-populated from an extender that we've built that's part of the system. All of that's in here. I can tell what the display order it is, what type of extender, what column it should go in, left or right. There's basically 2 columns, whether it's required, whether it should show on the list, and if so, in what order, so that I can have complete control over the presentation of that data. And again, even right down to naming of all of that stuff. If we go back to our form setup, I have calculated fields. So today, we can calculate things like price or the extension. I didn't point that out on the lines, but you notice I entered the quantity and the price. It filled out the amount for me. And then up in the header, it accumulated the total for me, right? Did all of that for us automatically. And that's all defined in the system. I can define those tabs. Remember, I pointed out the tabs. We have some at the bottom, lines tabs, and we have 2 at the top, required and optional, which are header tabs. Once I have tabs, I put fields onto the tabs. So I can position those tabs and I can tell it what fields go onto the tabs. And then finally, the workflow steps. So here's the basic workflow that represents this workflow right here, right? This is how it's represented. It's very simple. Whoops, very simple, very easy in the setup. I've got pending approval, update accounts, complete, suspend, edit job codes, and approve. And for each one of these, I can go into them. And then I can see on this approval, here are the approval rules. I have 2 users. That's what we saw when we executed the form, right? 2 people had to approve. And this user is a conditional approval. This user approves every document because there are no conditions. And if I go and look at the conditions, I keep drilling down. That's one of the things about TrinForms. There's very simple interface for that end user. The setup and configuration of it, there's a lot to it. It's kind of like the iceberg, right? Underneath what you see, there's a lot to the setup. And here I can see my approval rule condition. And I only get an admin approval if my total is greater than or equal to $5,000. So it looks to me, our Abe Lincoln approves all of them. The administrator only approves them if the total is more than $5,000, right? So a very simple, very basic initial approval. And those approval rules and conditions, including scripts, as I mentioned, are all linked to this workflow step. And I have multiple workflow steps. Once the workflow steps are defined for the form, all my fields, my calculated fields, and then I have form settings, as I mentioned. Right, all of these are editable settings specific to that form. Then I simply put the form back in active status, save, and off we go. Finally, extenders we talked about, those are your lookups. Those are things like your vendors, your chart of accounts, things like that. We have users and roles and users assignment to the roles. So we have users who only approve. We have users who can approve and submit. And of course, we have admins. I mentioned captions. So we really even have the ability to change. If you don't like the word submit, you can change it, right? And all of that's reflected on the interface right away. And all the while, we got system log and system settings so that it's very configurable from within the interface. Again, everything hosted, real simple and lightweight way for users to submit forms, to have them authorized properly. So you have a complete audit trail to authorize a transaction, and then complete integration with ERP systems, TrinDocs, or more. So that is a quick look at forms. I know we're running out of time here at the end, so I'll wrap it up with that, and we'll run this right into Q&A session at the wrap up at 4. But if anybody would like additional information on forms or TrinDocs or the new pay solution we have with invoice pay, drop us a note, let us know. We'll be happy to answer questions you have or give you a little more deeper dive on a one-on-one session when it's convenient for you.
All right, thanks. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. We were just going to say thank you, and we will open up the Q&A wrap-up session in just a second. So bring your questions over to that session, and we will go from there. Jay, you have anything else to add?
No, I appreciate it and look forward to talking to you.
Okay, Jay, if you want to hop on our wrap-up session, you can as well. I'll go ahead and get that session started, and I really appreciate all the attendees.
Guys, thanks for attending. This has been a great day. Appreciate you. Hopefully you got a lot of value from this, and we'll wrap everything up here in a couple of minutes.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.